currently raining, so if you hear raindrops in the background, just consider it as ASMR. Hello everyone, this is everything I read in April, and it is quite a short list. For the past few months, I have been in some kind of slump. I'm cautious of calling it one, as it wasn't as though I had no desire to read. It just seemed as though everything that I did read seemed incredibly dull. Maybe that is what a slump is. For me personally, I always considered my reading slumps the moments where I didn't want to read something, even though I know it is good, but it's the other way this time where everything sounded boring even though I wanted to read. I did read a couple of books between August of last year, when you last saw me, to April of this year. But it was such a minute number of books every month that I could not bring myself to take note of it in the form of a video. It was only in January of this year that I read more than a single digit, but it was 3 books from the same series, and so I didn't really want to make a monthly recap of it. I did consider it, and I am still considering it. If you are curious, in January I read one of the iconic Danmei novels written by none other than the most successful, and I presume that is of no contest, Danmei authors MXTX. It was Scum Villain's Self-Saving System. It is the last of her works that I read. I have given this series a lot of chances. I really did. I finally got myself to see through the very end. But that is not a discussion for this video. After all, it is no longer the hopeful morning like January. April has just ended and it is now May. The first book that I read for this month is not in this pile because I read it digitally. I wonder if it counts as cheating to include this book in the count. I base whether or not a book belongs to a monthly recap by the month I finish it rather than when I began. That seems to be the correct choice to make. In Love by Alfred was one of the books I've attempted to read months ago but have really struggled to focus on. And I don't know what invisible force had pushed me into finally honing into finishing it, but I did, and I adored it. I read this digitally, though I badly wish to have a physical copy of it. There's only one bookstore that I can find that has this on their inventory, but unfortunately it did not have the cover that I wanted. The Penguin Modern Classic one is so beautiful that I refuse to have any other edition of the book. But the only place I can find it on is Amazon, and the shipping fee is just, it's too much, okay? It's too much. It's very hard for me to justify a 2,000 plus shipping fee. In Love is a short story. According to readinglength.com, it estimates it to be around 32,000 words. In comparison, one of the other books I read that comes in this cute little compact size is over 50,000 words. It is a love story, of course. Set in 1940s New York City, we become the readers of a tale given by an unnamed man at a hotel bar. This tale details the love affair between him and a young divorced woman with a child. It is as simple as that. Both of our characters, that is the narrator and the young woman, are unnamed, and to me, that greatly worked in favor of the work. I do think that one of the best things about this book is the characters as individuals. I have found pieces of myself with these characters, and leaving them without a name bolsters this sense of sudden exposure of my own thoughts. Let me read for you a passage in chapter 1. But she had never really wanted to die. At least she said she had never really wanted to die. That oddly enough, the drifting away was not connected in her mind with death at all, but with something else. An idea of a kind of joy, of being finally free. And that if she ever were to feel free, it would resemble that sensation she had when she was least attached to the world. Upon hearing that title and seeing the passionate cover, I naturally made the assumption that I would be blessed with gorgeous paragraphs about the state of being in love. And I did, in a way. We often associate the idea of a love story with unity. We are usually more engrossed in how this love makes two as one. And when we read unrequited love stories, we mourn over the failure of becoming one. However, with this story, I did not get the sense of that. I struggled to articulate myself and the experience of reading the book. It was like I was simply listening to someone I know talk about their love. When we hear our friends talk about their love life, we don't necessarily feel the same way we do when we read novels of romance, even though they are both stories. To us, our friends are familiar outside their relationship. You know who they are, regardless of the state of their romance. So when we listen to them talk of their latest crushes or never-ending heartbreak, there is still this very distinct shape of them being separate from the romance in their life. Do you understand what I mean? To me, the book was like witnessing characters who are entangled in love, but the author never lets it consume them to the point that I can't recognize them outside of it. They never really become one blob in my head. They are constantly two separately interesting beings. He is always the protagonist and she is always the lover. And when I say that, I do not mean to dilute the moments of passion in this book. Frankly, this book has some of the most romantic scenes I've read in a while. If you love to see a man on his knees yearning, you will definitely enjoy segments of this book. In my humble opinion, considering that I'm not very experienced with the romance genre, this book has the best man kneeling in front of a woman scene ever. I literally had to put my phone down and just walk around because, bro, there's this film that I haven't seen yet, but there's this scene that I want to talk about. It's quite an old movie. I believe it was released in 1967. It recently went around circulation again because of a popular tweet that you may have seen. It's this one, which is apparently a screenshot from the movie with the subtitles "Her neck 10 kisses long." I mentioned this scene because if you are looking for literature with similar romantic lines, I would recommend you give In Love by Alfred a try, because there's a very specific line that's very similar to that you would enjoy. I am also someone that really likes when authors just talk and talk and talk. Give me a dozen of ands, give me all the commas. It's great. It just flows really nicely in my head. And so this was a truly enjoyable read that I absolutely recommend. It was very amusing. I rearranged the book pile because I realized it was not in the order of when I read it. Okay, so next book, Ravensong by TJ Klune. This was a long-awaited reread for me. I first read this long before these paperbacks were even made. I'm pretty sure the third book wasn't even out at that time. Green Creek is a werewolf urban fantasy adult romance series. It focuses on a town called Green Creek and the prominent werewolf pack that protects it. Ravensong is the second book in the series. There are a total of 4 books, and every book focuses on a different couple, but the storyline is very intertwined, so I would absolutely not recommend skipping a book. Because of that, even if I try to avoid spoilers, you will inevitably be spoiled about some things in book 1 as I talk about book 2. Ravensong in particular is the love story between Gordo Livingstone, a powerful witch, and Mark Bennett, a werewolf. In book 1, we learn that there is a deep romantic history between these two. There's clearly a lot of hurt and tension, and in book 2, we finally unravel that knot. Speaking of knots, this book has the whole alpha, beta, omega thing going on. But if you are familiar with the Omegaverse via fanfiction, then no, that is not the kind of system that this series follows. From what I remember, no one even gets knotted. Sorry, spoiler alert. When I finished book 1, I was super excited to get into Ravensong because, hello, it is middle-aged access to lovers yaoi with a witch and a wolf. Mark is in his 40s and Gordo is just 40 flat, I'm pretty sure. I remember really liking this when I first read it, and that's partly why I waited so long to read it again. I wanted to let enough time pass so that I don't remember what exactly went down and I get to experience what it was like during my first time. I figured enough years has passed that I no longer remember the timeline clearly, and so I read it. To be honest, I didn't like it as much as the first time. I may not have remembered a lot of the story clearly, but I certainly remember the emotions that I experienced, and there seem to be a lot of changes in that area. Firstly, let's talk about the writing style. TJ Klune has a lot of repetition. I find that quite charming, and I think he manages to make it work most of the time. But I will say that I felt as though in this book, it was bordering on being annoying. I've reread Wolfsong a lot, and the writing style hasn't really changed from it. In this one though, I occasionally felt as though the repetition was unnecessary and would even ruin the flow of a scene. In general though, I really enjoy the simple and short writing style here. Things are told very plainly. Another change in my heart is the emotional impact of the story. I cried the first time I read this. I loved this book, I really did. I favored it over Wolfsong. But there have been changes in how I feel with the characters and relationships, beginning with the side characters. The Bennett pack, which if you haven't figured it out, is the prominent werewolf pack that I was talking about in the synopsis. They are werewolf royalty. No changes there. I enjoyed them as I always have. If you love very clingy, protective family dynamics, you'd like this book. I would say that's basically what the Green Creek series is all about. It's all about community and what happens to those who lose that, and trying to forgive people in that community when they've done something unforgivable. When they make a choice that hurts you and that choice never achieves the justification it was made on, can you bring yourself to forgive this person you love or loved, knowing they might have hurt you for maybe nothing? It's the side characters that I'm more so about. We have the Bennett pack, yes. They're the main circle, but Gordo is a witch. He is not a werewolf of the Bennett pack, and so he has his own little circle of humans that he is close with. I didn't appreciate this circle as much as I used to. My familiarity with them via Wolfsong really did a lot of heavy lifting. There's one character in particular that I have a big problem with. Her name is Jessie. I'll try to be as vague as possible, okay? In book 1, we meet Jessie because she has a connection of some kind with one of the main characters. By the time we get to book 2, that has pretty much passed. She is the younger sister of one of Gardo's close friends, and that is how she ends up sticking around in the main circle. Gardo is like the parental figure to one of the main characters in the first book, so naturally, he doesn't really give a damn about whatever history went down there, so we don't dwell on it. He's too old for that. We only see her once in a while. I did not like those once in a while. Why? Because she keeps getting the worst lines. Green Creek is a very earnest series when it comes to the whole family and community thing. Friendship is magic, yada yada. Pulls a lot of cliches that you'd expect from books like that. Consequently, we get a lot of corny dialogues, and personally, I think Jessie gets the worst of it. I did not feel as though she had the character to back up the things that she was saying. Take for example the protagonist of Wolfsong, Ox. We witness as Ox becomes this powerful, strong leader. So when he says a cool line or something intimidating, it works because we know he has the skills to back up what he's saying. Jessie, on the other hand, I don't think so. She says things, and I think I am supposed to think she's a cool, badass, independent woman who takes no shits from men, but really, I just cringe. Majority of her lines are just her saying things like men, or threatening someone. Gordo here is a powerful witch. There's a scene where she threatens him, kinda, because he tells her to do something, and of course, as a strong, independent, badass woman, she has to say something even though he wasn't being a dick about it. And Gordo gets scared. But I did not see a single reason why he would be. I at least would get it if she did that to another insignificant character. I'm supposed to buy that when she's talking to the Gordo Livingstone? You know what it is? It's like listening to a kid flex. Kids are always saying things like, "Oh, I'll beat you up, I'm as strong as Goku." And it's cute because they aren't. But it isn't really cute when it comes to Jessie because everyone around her takes her strength seriously and fear her. But I don't have a reason to think the same way they do. It's just a bit of a shame because we don't really have a lot of female characters in the series on the hero side. After all, it is an MLM series, so it's mostly male characters. So it just sucks that like one of the two female characters on the good side is not very great. And now let's talk about the big relationship, the romance in Ravensong. It was a lot more romantic in my memories. That's literally why I favored it over Wolfsong. I vividly remember it being insanely romantic. Honestly, Gordo and Mark were kind of lacking in chemistry, and the problem is rooted, in my opinion, that there is another relationship in the series that was more interesting, had more chemistry, and had more emotional intrigue, and that is Gordo Livingstone and Thomas Bennett, Mark's older brother. Their scenes together just seem to be written with more emotion. The main conflict between Mark and Gordo is the same conflict between Thomas and Gordo. It is not strange for Thomas to be brought up whenever Mark and Gordo talk about the conflict. They mention him so much in their arguments and resolution that it felt like there were three people in this relationship. I would even bet that Thomas's platonic love for Gordo was mentioned and emphasized more than Mark's feelings for Gordo. There is a line that I loved during my first read. Let me read it. It is another character to Gordo about Mark. Because I have never seen a wolf love another as much as he loved you. Not even Thomas and his mate. I was super duper kilig when I first read those words. I was so excited to reach this part, but when I did, I was kinda just like, are you sure? Maybe you just haven't seen a lot of wolves. I don't think we really see a lot of their memories. We do, okay, we do. But I don't know if I would call it a lot. If I compared their flashback scenes to Gordo's flashbacks of Thomas, I personally felt my heart race more when reading the latter. It also doesn't help that because their main conflict was so heavily related to Thomas, it kind of cheapened the emotional turmoil that should have been rooted in Gordo and Mark. Yes, there's still heavy emotions there, but it wasn't entirely centered on them. And because it wasn't centered on them, the emotional loss and gain also wasn't entirely theirs. I was more affected by the fights and happiness between Thomas and Gordo because it felt heavier. I still enjoyed Mark and Gordo's relationship. It's only that they seem to be overshadowed by the other relationship. Would I recommend this book? I would if you like werewolf pack dynamics and found families, or if you're just looking for a romance between middle-aged characters, because we don't really get that a lot. The third book is another long-awaited read of mine. I don't remember when I exactly first encountered this book. It kind of just always existed to me. It wasn't until I read Swimming in the Dark that I got a hint on what it was about and grew curious about it. If you are interested, I talked about Swimming in the Dark in my previous monthly recap. Giovanni's Room is heavily referenced in that book. I read Swimming in the Dark first, and now that I finished Giovanni's Room, I can confidently say that you do not need to read Giovanni's Room before reading Swimming in the Dark, but you will get a hint of a spoiler about the book in case that's a big deal for you. Giovanni's Room is set in Paris during the 1950s. Our protagonist is surprisingly not Giovanni. It is an American man named David. He is engaged to a woman who is currently in Spain, kind of just soul-seeking and figuring out whether or not this is really the right choice for them both. During an outing with his friend, David meets an Italian bartender by the name Giovanni. This leads to Giovanni and David growing closer, and as we read on, we explore the complex feelings of David, who is torn between his desires and what it means to be an American man. My copy doesn't come with an introduction, but prior to this, I have watched a couple of interviews with James Baldwin, so I had a bit of context on who he is. I think this is one of those books where you can appreciate it more with the context of the author's life and the time period. It's not necessary at all, but you will just enjoy it more. During the 1950s, America was still heavily segregated, so a story as explicitly queer as Giovanni's Room, written by a black author, was highly controversial. From watching James Baldwin's interview, I could feel the parts of himself that he gave to this book. Baldwin left America for Paris because he was sick of everything going on there. Paris had quite a social cohesion, especially compared to America. You see that in the book as well. David talks about being in Paris and seeing all these queer people and feeling repulsed by them. This is not his idea of what a man should be, But that's who he is, and he can't help himself from succumbing into it even as he tries not to. David is severely suffering from the expectations of toxic masculinity, and the harder he represses his own wants, the more he ends up hurting not only himself but those around him. It's a really sad book on isolating oneself from your own community, not exclusively in a sexuality sense. The book has such a lonely atmosphere, and David never really seems to feel at home in Paris. A part of him will always be anchored back in America. Whether or not he wants to be, his identity and roots as an American is too deep to just forget about. I was just really sad reading this book. Oh my gosh. Do I recommend this book? Absolutely, it is a classic for a reason. Next and last book in my hands is Gilgamesh by Emily H. Wilson. This is not the book that I read. Before we talk about this book and my thoughts on it, let's have a quick story time. A year ago, my auntie took me and my cousins with her to a coffee shop. Before arriving there, she surprised us with a trip to the bookstore, with her paying for all of our books. She wanted us to be very quick though, as the person she was meeting was already at the cafe. I knew what story I wanted to get. Lately, as in lately during that day, an acquaintance had been talking about the Epic of Gilgamesh. Basically, I got fujopated into reading it. She was like, bro, this is peak ancient yaoi. I asked the clerk if they had Epic of Gilgamesh. They didn't, so I got sad and frazzled. I didn't know what to get. Just as I was about to grab a copy of God of the Woods, I saw it. A book with the word Gilgamesh. This had to be the actual epic, right? Because this was displayed on the wall right in between a copy of the Iliad and the Odyssey, translated by Emily Wilson. Who is the author of this book? Emily H. Wilson. I just figured maybe it's the same person. My auntie was getting really impatient, so I got this, gave it to her, paid it, and it was only when we got to the cafe and I unboxed the wrapping that I realized this is not in fact the epic. It is a novel retelling, and it is also book 2 of a series. It's just been on my shelf this whole time, waiting to be listed online. The reason why I was really turned off after learning it was a retelling is because retellings usually have a tendency to be censored. Great news, it does not. Yes, I gave the series a shot. The real last book that I read for the month is Inanna by Emily H. Wilson, the first book in Sumerians trilogy. The Sumerians trilogy is a retelling of Mesopotamian mythology. There are 3 main characters whose POVs we alternate on: Inanna, Gilgamesh, and Ninshubbar. Gilgamesh is the son of 2 gods, but he himself is human. By the time he appears in the book, he's already a well-recognized hero. Ninshubbar is a powerful warrior from a faraway tribe who, after a series of dramatic events, finds herself far away from the lands and gods that she once knew. Inanna is a newly born goddess of love and war. Her birth is colossal because the gods have been exiled from heaven, and since residing on earth, they've been unable to produce a god baby. Every other child that the gods have been having were mortal. Inanna grew up in a very pampered and sheltered environment thanks to her parents, and so she spends majority of the book being naive and enduring, and trying to grow up without any real proper guidance. Out of the 3 of them, Inanna is very clearly the protagonist. She is the center of all of the events, and without her, their timelines would not have coalesced. I don't know if this remains the same for the other 2 books, which are titled with the other characters. In Inanna, it is definitely her. At the early start of the book, we learn a few things. Number 1, the gods are slowly dying. Not only are they unable to produce god babies, they no longer have a stock of melum, which is a powder that gives them their power. Number 2, there is a war going on between the gods and a king named Akka, who doesn't believe in gods the way they have been worshipped for as long as they've known. Gilgamesh, being a son of a god, is of course fighting in the side of the gods. Number 3, there is a power struggle between the gods themselves. And lastly, Inanna's birth is worth celebrating but is also, at least to the gods, highly questionable, as Inanna's mother claims that she had done nothing out of the ordinary to be able to birth a proper god baby. And so the entire book is the amalgamation of these conflicts slowly merging into one. I am a bit lost on where to start regarding my opinions. I don't really read a lot of books where there's multiple narrators, not because I avoid them or I dislike them, it just doesn't happen. And this time, I didn't really like it. The style only really works for me if all the narrators are equally or closely interesting to be read about. Unfortunately, I really did not enjoy reading Inanna's story. There is still some amusement to be found in her parts, but in comparison to the narrations of Gilgamesh and Ninchubar, it is lacking. I would end up groaning and taking a break whenever I finished Ninchubar's chapters because I knew I would then have to read Inanna's part. The momentum of enjoyment that I had would just stagnate. Even in the very end where Inanna finally gains some development, I still found her chapters to be tiring to read. I wish I could tell you why exactly, but I can't seem to pinpoint the specifics. I simply did not care for her. There is a part where we get a bit of a break from her parts, so it's just Gilgamesh, Ninchubar, Gilgamesh, Ninchubar. That was the part that I most enjoyed. She's still heavily involved in the other characters' perspectives. It's just that there's something specifically wrong about the way she tells the story that makes me want to sleep. Maybe it's the fact that she's a goddess? It's not very fun to read about characters who are very powerful. Well, she does face suffering, she does, okay? Because of how she is, mixed in with a writing style that isn't very emotionally intriguing, I don't really feel anything when she's suffering. Her anger is intentionally very repressed that you don't feel it. When she finally snaps, it's still lacking an impact. That's what it is. Overall, the book is just lacking a real impact. Things are happening and in theory, those things are interesting. But when they happen, I kind of just go, oh, okay, I guess that's that. Out of the three main characters, I enjoyed Gilgamesh the most, Ninchubar second. Gilgamesh is the funniest. His dynamic with the characters are really engaging. It's only through Gilgamesh and Ninchubar's chapters that I grow fond of other characters. For example, Inanna's mother, I genuinely felt nothing for her when I read her in Inanna's POV. But then I meet her in Ninchubar's POV and she just blooms to be so much more interesting. In terms of accuracy, I can't give a definitive rating because I haven't read the original myths. As I was reading, I naturally grew curious of a few concepts being introduced. I would stop and look it up and see absolutely nothing for it. The author just admits that like, oh, I made that part up. It's to be expected of a retelling to make changes to suit the author's preference, so that's not really a fault. Am I disappointed? Just a little bit. There are things that I know from the original that were changed, and I thought the changes were lame, but it is what it is. It was an alright read. It ends with a cliffhanger, the first book. I liked book 1 enough to read book 2 and then 3, but I'm just in no rush to get to it. I would only recommend this if you like retellings, I guess. Oh, actually, if you enjoy the story of Achilles and Patroclus, you might like this. Anyways, that is a wrap for April. I'm just glad I read more than one book. I don't have any book in particular that I am eyeing to read for May. I have a really long queue to get through. If you have any suggestions, do let me know, and bye bye.